And that way we'll be able to capture our questions. I also do, for your information, plan to save the chat. So for those of you who have questions, Mary has offered to help me during this session to kind of be our chat master. So I'd rather focus on all of you and guide you. And Mary, feel free to chime in if you see something in chat that we might want to talk about.
I will definitely, and I'll try not to talk too much because this topic really interests me.
well, that's all right. You can talk. You're just one of us. So, so thank you all for being a part of this conversation. To Mary's point, we do have a smallish group, so let's keep this personal. If you have, you know, in the interest of politeness, however, and not talking over each other, if you don't mind, down in the reaction bar, just raising your hand. Why don't we all practice doing that right quick? Just raise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Everybody got that?
Okay.
Jen, do you know how to do that? There she is. Okay. All right. Looks like everybody's got that, and then you have to lower it. So we'll just kind of do that, and I'll keep an eye on y'all. So today we're here to talk about assessment tools and how best to integrate them into our RYLA programs. Let me first just ask for a show of hands for how many of you have already done this with one or more assessment tools. Okay, so most all of you, but not all of you. All right, perfect. What I'd like to do today is kind of show you a sampling, and I will go ahead and share my screen here to do that. It's in my purse, honey. Yeah. Sorry. I apparently have my husband's wallet in my purse. Oops. Okay, so I want to just kind of go over some quick concepts, and then we'll open it up to questions here. Assessments and experiential learning are really this perfect marriage. With activities, we debrief the activity, we ask questions like what happened, and we keep it that open-ended. So students bubble up with what happened, you know, how did they feel? Did they feel left out? Did they feel they were forced to lead? Do we feel that they couldn't speak? What was that experience like for them? And then to follow was, so what? You know, why does what you just experienced matter to you and to the group? And then we ask the question, so now what? Now what in our local communities? Now what in our schools? Now what globally? Why does what we learned matter to where we go next in our lives? And where assessments fall into that is, depending on which one we've chosen for our event, they provide a filter for us to use in processing these experiences more focally. So that is the beauty of this marriage. You know, emotional intelligence is just one of the frameworks that could partner beautifully with Dr. Posner's 5 practices of exemplary leadership. You can see on this pyramid, you know, emotional intelligence is composed of relationship management, social awareness, self-control, but at the bottom of the pyramid is self-awareness. That's what these assessment tools can help us build and provide that filter I was talking about. I already kind of shared this slide with you in my little snapshot. You can I look at this as sort of a menu, if you will, of the types of assessment tools we can choose from. And I can tell you, if you haven't done this already, you can Google this and it'll make you crazy. So we want to be choosy. We want to, as Dr. Posner mentioned, we want to choose assessment tools that are based in science, that are proven, and that are validated. So you can't just go online and choose anything. just real briefly, I'm going to scroll through these and we can go back to these if there's a special interest. One of the category of assessments that we use is that of personality preferences. I personally have used this at the College of Vet Med. I've also used this in my teen RYLA here in my community. I use Myers-Briggs, but these are other very, very acceptable and validated personality preference tools. Enneagram is to the upper left, and Myers-Briggs upper right, DISC lower left, and on the lower right we have True Colors. And those are all assessment tools that among the best of the best. And this will look familiar to you. In my mini RYLA, my teen RYLA coming up in 2 weeks, I am actually using the 5 practices of exemplary leadership for my mini RYLarians. This is a $6 assessment tool that asks students to assess their current leadership strengths and also identify those leadership skills they want to grow into. I'm going to have them do this assessment before 2 weeks before. They're actually going to get it in their folders this next week. And I'm asking them to return it to me on Halloween Day so that my team can go through them and make sure our work is focused on what they want to grow into. Then these students will get them back. But I'm excited to use this. It's the first time I've used this particular assessment tool, and we are using these 5 practices as our overarching framework coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll go through the rest of these quickly. The CPI 260 coaching report for leaders is exceptional. I've used it with my veterinary students. It's probably, we can use it in teens. And then of course, post high school, also totally acceptable. Probably not so much in our middle schoolers. It might be a little advanced for them. But this is a brilliant assessment tool. The result is a report for them on their strengths, and then also a snapshot of suggested next steps in skill building. Thomas Kilman, conflict mode. Some of you have probably used this. Teens are really interested in understanding why they feel conflicted and are fascinated to learn that we each have a default mode to resolve conflict. But how important is it to first know that, but then also be able to adapt a conflict resolution style to the circumstance? Gallup has a Clifton Strengths Assessment. You've probably heard of this. This is slightly different. This is an assessment that looks out what do you currently do well and what would you like to do better. Emotional and social competence, emotional intelligence assessment tools are available. This is Travis Bradbury's assessment tool, and also Daniel Goleman, also the author of Emotional Intelligence, has an assessment tool that pairs with his research and his books. And then lastly, this is one you probably haven't heard of. I have used it with great success, even in middle schoolers. And this is the Neuro Leadership Institute SCARF assessment of engagement. You can just kind of read down the list of criteria that are examined in this assessment tool. The students are fascinated with this one. They want to learn how to address status in their groups. How do we promote status in fellow teens that just don't seem to have much? And they're interested in accomplishing these kinds of things. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's just to whet your appetite. And let's get this rolling here, folks. I have a question here for you to get us started. So, in your opinion, what benefit could these tools provide in your RYLA events? What are you seeing at this point?
I think in the transformative way, folks can kind of get in touch at their age with where they are now. I think what's also important though, in assessments that I'm mental health 46 years. And so of course, assessment is a part of my life. So it's also important. So for instance, well, you change with what you're doing. And so it's important for folks that are participating in these to understand that this is where they are now. It doesn't mean this is where you'll be tomorrow, but it's important to know where you are now so you can get to tomorrow and understand that changes happen so you don't get stuck. So that's one thing that comes to mind to me. So we're thinking in our RYLA this year, I'm really looking at to have everybody that presents talks about their career. Rather than me introducing or us introducing them, have them talk about who they are and how they got here. Where was I when I was your age and how did I get here? Rather than this going from 0 to 100, overnight. So eliminate that expectation, just realize you got to work to get to where you are. It doesn't happen overnight. And so within the assessment and understanding, this is who you are, this is who your folks on your team are right now here today. And even at the end of RYLA, you may not even be where you started here at the very beginning. So I'm going to do, so I don't know if you want me to share this, but I'm going to start open with my favorite classic family therapy exercise is to do an obstacle course. And so at the very beginning, I let them choose who's going to lead the team through the obstacle course. I don't choose it. They choose who the leader is. We blindfold them. They don't see the obstacle course. They come in and they go through the obstacle course. Then we talk about what the experience was. We do that on day one. And then at the close, we do it again with the same, we call them Ohanas here. We have groups together that are Ohanas. We'll go through it again and we'll talk about, what we've learned. So who did they choose for the leader? How did you go through there? And that's your listening, right? Your communication, all that kind of stuff. So your questions that these various that you're asking, that's exactly what we ask. So I would do it with families. It's fascinating at the beginning of therapy, what happens, because typically they're dealing with dysfunction or other issues. And at the end, if we've done our treatment right, and everyone's worked on stuff, then they move forward. And then at the end, they breeze right through the obstacle course in a whole different way. So that kind of experience. But each presenter, we're going to have talk about their, path to where they are now and why they're actually speaking here. And then try to break that down into the Ohanas for everybody to do that. That's what we're thinking here. So great tools. I got to look at some of these. I haven't seen many of these. So thank you.
So can you describe your obstacle course just a little more to get a picture of it?
So come with masking tape and you tape off the floor. You tape off a rectangular section that's wide enough that people can step through, and then make squares and just X off things and just make it varied. And then I bring stuffed animals so people don't get hurt. And I just put them in various places. Don't bring Legos or something because those hurt when you step on them. Stuffed animals is pretty cool because when they step, they can feel that they're touching something and they usually can back off okay. I also stand pretty closely in case I have to catch somebody that might be falling. I haven't actually had any, I've used it for many, many, many years. So then I have blindfolds. Make sure you have like clean hankies or something, or scarves that each person can put on. I have them outside of the room. So I have them waiting outside of the room, deciding who's going to lead the group through. They do that while I go in and quick rearrange everything. And so between each group, I rearrange everything so it's different. I might even rearrange the tape a little bit because they've seen the obstacle course by that point. And then I bring them in and I ask who's going to lead. And then so I don't give them any direction. How they lead, it could be verbal. I tell them they can't move their feet, but any other thing is okay. So they can do verbally, they can hold hands and walk them through. And then it's like a lot of like, oh no, move your foot to the left, move your foot to the right. So there's no touching the line or no touching the object. And then I have a scorekeeper. So somebody from the family keeps score. So we'll have like 10 in our Ohana. So somebody will be the scorekeeper. And that's interesting too, how they keep score. How critical are they? How loose are they? I don't give them direction on how to keep score because, that says a lot about that person too. So it's just a total psychodynamic assessment of where people are at that point coming in. So the first day, these kids, we split them up. None of them know each other. We try to split them up into wahanas. So they're brand new to each other. So they come in very shy. So to do this on their first day, it's a great exercise right at the beginning. By the end, this is a powerful team. So the difference is, and then all those questions about what was that like for you? I mean, every person needs to answer. I didn't feel safe at all. I was the last one. That wasn't fair. You know, God, leading was really hard. You know, just see where they're at. So that's just and I've used it for years and years and years with all ages, and people just love it.
So Rick, it sounds like your leader is the only one not blindfolded.
Right, the leader's not blindfolded.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
I loved your comment about, and Dr. Posner talked about this too, about creating a metric.
Yeah.
And you know, this is probably not something you can put a number on per se, but you're getting the kids to recall what it was like on day one, and now they've done the same activity on day whatever it is, 3 or 4. And you know, they're verbalizing a metric basically to each other as an individual and as a team. So
yeah,
to be able to, and then to be able to shine the light on their progress, because progress is intrinsically motivating, and that then becomes a driver for them going forward. So what a brilliant way to do that. That's really great. And anybody else have, stemming from Rick's story, any, you know, and this notion of embedding an assessment into a RYLA event, your thoughts? Have you done this? Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Well, you know, right off the top, it makes it interactive. You know, there's nothing more boring than sitting in a floor and watching speaker after speaker. So, and it allows them to be themselves right away. You know, that it provides a format for them to express themselves quite openly, but yet sort of incognito in a way, because others, it creates bonds. It creates bonds right away, that you have other people that are working towards the same goal and feel the same way you do. You know, one of our icebreakers, although Rick is on Oahu, I'm on the Big Island, it's 2 different camps, but virtually we've been working together. We started off with square dancing, get them into groups and learn how to listen over who's there. And within an hour, these kids know who each other's are, bonds, and I believe assessments will do that same kind of bonding.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. It is true that providing an assessment tool, and we can talk a little bit too, one thing I wanted to ask you about is your ideas about when to administer an assessment. Is this something that must be done a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead, whatever it might be, so the students are already coming in with a self-awareness, or in a longer RYLA camp, a more intensive RYLA camp that lasts a week, could that assessment process be inserted in a timely manner during the course of the week? So that's something else that we can talk about here in just a minute. But to your point, Jen, to know that all participants in a RYLA event have experienced the same assessment tool. They've all been asked essentially the same questions about themselves. And now they're coming into camp with a new awareness of where they are today. So I appreciate that commonality, that bonding. They've all been through this already together. So anybody else? Brian, any thoughts from your experience? You need to unmute. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm from District 5220, which is, I'm from Lodi, which is, we're in the valley, right in between, well, we're east of San Francisco, in the Central Valley. I'm just not real familiar with the assessment, the assessment toolbox,
Okay.
the assessments you were talking about. So I'm kind of just looking, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is it that our camp does that,
Okay.
and so, yeah, I'm not real comfortable saying too much right now, because I'm,
Okay.
I'm still learning myself.
I think Mark had his hand up. Mark Solnit.
Go ahead, Mark.
I can figure out the mute button. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm in Denver. I've been involved with Rocky Mountain RYLA for 12 years now. And we lead conferences for both high school students and middle school students separately, right? When we were at our peak, we had 5 separate weeks, 2 for high school students serving about 400 students, 2 for middle school students serving about 300 students, and then the RYLA Plus, which you heard about, which was about 20 students for the physically disabled. In all of them, we use True Colors, which is one of the ones that was talked about. And we found it to be a very simple matrix. We have a 1-page assessment, and our camps are a week long. So the kids show up Sunday afternoon, leave Friday at noon. On Monday, one of the first things we do, the first full day, is a True Colors assessment. And everybody is a mix of all the colors if you've done it. But I've found over my 12 years that my colors have evolved a little bit. I'm very engineering, analytical, so I'm gold, and green. These are my colors, and blue, which is the more like emotional side, has grown dramatically through my experience of RYLA and my realization of who I really am, probably, and my willingness to learn over the years. But the point is, we're able to use that assessment at all ages, and the kids, it's really simple. And both of my kids went through RYLA and became head counselors at RYLA, and we still talk about things like our True Colors years later. And it's a really easy way to recognize, and part of the curriculum, and we're happy to share all this, we've provided our manual to people. Our manual is currently 200 pages long that we use to run the week. And there's lots of assessments throughout the week. Every activity is guided. We use the what, so what, now what, but we also provide prompted debrief questions for every activity that we do, and we debrief every activity right away after it. But the point is back to the assessment. It's the only one we use, and I'm looking for ways to incorporate more assessments into our curriculum. But this one is simple, and we teach the kids, if you're blue and you're leading someone who's orange is more like fun and it has to be fun. Blue is about emotions, and gold is organized. The way you lead somebody who's a primary color different than yours needs to be different, because if you're doing something that's well organized, the fun kids are going to be like, oh my God, this is horrible. And adults too, right? I mean, it applies to all of us. And so we found that one to be very effective, and we use it. And we do a lot of fun with it. So I'm happy to share that with you guys if you're interested.
Looks like
Thank you,
Caitlin
Mark.
had a hand up. Caitlin? Oh, mute.
Need to unmute, Caitlin.
So sorry.
That's all right.
Mark, that's so amazing to hear you speak about the True Colors. I'm with RYLA 5170. I'm on support staff, but I attended as camper, counselor, leadership presenter, and we've done, I think that's something that's similar to True Colors, because we do colors with it, but it's not the True Colors assessment. And I think my biggest takeaway in listening to this right now is I need to figure out what kind of assessment we're giving and how it is backed, because we do it in one of our modules. It's a leadership styles module, and we do it with an activity that causes them to think about what kind of leader they are, how they're working with the other types like Mark just described as well. But I really like the idea of taking it either pre-camp or at an opening camp activity or within their families prior to some of this, so that we can make that module time more useful.
Thank you, Caitlin. I should have mentioned early on, I have links to all of the assessments that I listed and kind of breezed through here a few minutes ago. And Mary, I've been told that I can go ahead and create a handout for you all with the names of all these assessments and the links to them. And I will get that out to not only you all that are in my sessions, but also to all the registrants within a few days.
Yes.
And I have one to True Colors. I have one to MBTI. I have one to the conflict mode. I have all of those. So you can delve into those a little bit. Some of them, and this is something we can, we need to factor in, is some of them do cost money. for each individual taking them. Others are free. So that may or may not be a consideration for your particular events if you're on a budget. Or perhaps those fees can even be charged to the participants. You know, that would be a personal choice for your districts. But yeah, I will get those links out. It was beyond the scope of this discussion session to delve deeply into each and every one of them.
Yes.
But True Colors is one that I do hear about often. The Myers-Briggs type indicator MBTI assessment has been around for decades and decades. And I do get some questions about some of these, like MBTI. Are they old fashioned? You know, are they no longer relevant? They've been around so long. And what I can tell you is that's absolutely not true.
Right.
These assessments have been revitalized as time goes on, and they're as relevant as they ever were. So let's
True Colors is based on the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
We use True Colors as well. I'm a big Myers-Briggs fan, which it's a lot more sophisticated and nuanced than True Colors, but True Colors works well. Our format is very similar to what Mark described. We use True Colors as well. We have a 5.5-day camp. We do True Colors, one of the very first activities we do. But I agree. I like the idea of potentially doing some work up front prior to camp. And one of the things I know Bridget Markwood is going to be talking about in her hybrid sessions is talking about some of the upfront work that you can do virtually. And that would be one of the things that it could be a real effective and efficient use of time, in my opinion.
Okay.
I'm curious about the emotional intelligence 2.0. I'm not familiar with that, but we use primal leadership or emotional intelligence as our format, our structure. So the 4 components of emotional intelligence. I'd be really curious about that instrument.
Yes, it's comparable. I am like you. I've used Goleman's model in my work more, but I think they're probably equally as provocative and useful. Bradbury's model has been around for quite a while as well, so I would think it would be something you'd want to just kind of take a really hard look at and see which one might be more applicable for your group. To Mary's point about Myers-Briggs, I do think that it is, you use the word nuanced. It is more sophisticated, and it's an assessment tool that can be taken as deep as you want it to. For me, I've actually used it in my consulting work in veterinary practices, and veterinary technicians and assistants really don't want to do the whole deep thing. They put dogs and cats under anesthesia. So, they're more interested in what is it going to take for us to make a solid team. But even a more surface approach is so incredibly valuable. People come away going, wait, this person isn't wrong, and they're not trying to get back at me, and they're not trying to run my life in a way that I just can't live it. They're just different. And it takes that cloak and veil of, I'll use the word oppression at sometimes in the workplace, just peels it right away. And now all of a sudden you can be a team again. And to your point, Mary, I believe is your point, to have the diversity, to have that mix in your team, and to be able to bring that out at RYLA. I've actually put on the Myers-Briggs, I've put all the extroverts together and all the introverts together and had them do a project. And it is hysterical.
It's fascinating.
You don't even have to say anything. You just watch, everybody watches it play out, and then you mix them up and do a different project, and it's night and day.
Absolutely.
So it's a pretty fun thing. You don't have to get up and say anything. You just do it.
Yeah. I think Rick had his hand up.
Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was in grad school, I took a whole course on the Myers-Briggs and on assessments. And what's important to note is that The Myers-Briggs, it measures your preferences at the time with what you're actually doing. It's important to let folks know that those change. So suddenly if you've gone from being part of a staff and you've suddenly risen to being a leader, those preferences can shift. So it's a measurement of where you are in that moment. And it's important to let folks know that those are your preferences, and they may be with you throughout your lifetime, but as your role changes, so do your preferences. And that's one of the hazards of the Myers-Briggs. People think that they're always going to be that same person throughout. But as you're exposed, and especially with our youth that we're training to be leaders, it's important to let them know that when you're in different roles, you grow and you evolve. And you may have been introverted at one point, but you may become extroverted if you're thrown into certain situations. So it's that feeling of that you're that person in the Myers-Briggs with those personality traits throughout lifetime. It traps people into thinking that they have to be the same way all the time, and they're not, because they do rise in certain situations, and it does shift as you grow and as you evolve. And so that was from my class in grad school on assessments in the Myers-Briggs. That was the important message that I left with. And so we want to make sure that if we're using that as a tool, that we're also letting people know in different situations, you may be a different person. I was the oldest in my family of 5 siblings, but at the same time I was born, each month my aunties had kids too, and I was the youngest of the cousins. And so in different roles, I was a different person. So I felt it myself, you know. So it's an important message to give to folks so they don't feel as they're always going to be that same person, because you can learn and you can grow and you can shift.
I appreciate that, Rick. I really do. I think, yeah, it and again, becomes sort of a personal metric, because you saw yourself back then, you know, leading in this way, or even not being able to lead, but now here you are. And it is what Dr. Posner mentioned is, you know, leadership can be taught, leadership can be learned. And these self-assessment tools really help you to know where you are today and then what you can grow into. The other thing I think that's really important with True Colors or MBTI or these conflict modes, whatever it might be, is that we're all a mix of all of them, that none of us are pure anything. And these assessments, I have gotten pushback from students about feeling like they're being pigeonholed and labeled. So I think with any of these assessments, they need to be framed up front as not a way to judge each other or categorize each other, but rather a way of understanding our personal mix of attributes, perhaps those qualities that we default to, especially in times of stress and leadership. A leadership role can be stressful. So we tend to default to those characteristics that are most comfortable for us. But the part of the leadership learning is to learn to adapt those default characteristics and the ones that we don't normally go to know how to use them in circumstances where those other characteristics are in demand. And that's the growth. And that's what RYLA can be all about, is literally that out of the box, you know, facilitated opportunity to lead in a place where you're just kind of not okay, but we're all there together. It's safe. So let's give it a go and encourage. And that's true with any assessment. It looks like they're getting close to.
No, we're
wrapping.
fine.
Okay.
No, we're fine.
Okay. So Bruce,
it's 1:44. We've got about 11 more minutes.
okay. So we haven't heard, I don't think, from Bruce or AJ. Do you have anything you want to share or ask, or anything you've experienced that maybe was a challenge in the realm of assessment tools? Who wants to go?
I could go a little bit. I agree with everything you said. I did my master's degree final paper on the Myers-Briggs and using that in housing. I worked in colleges and student life. But just like you said, I've used it many times to get roommates to work together. And it makes a big, especially in quads where they were unexpected, they had to have a quad room. And getting those people to understand each other and why they do things helps a lot. And to Rick's point, yeah, and to yours too, it's important not to get caught up in the boxes. That's the main thing. And just realize that, yeah, you can change, but also you have all those different characteristics and you use them at different times, and you can change your preferences. So,
Mhm.
yeah, we use True Colors at our RYLA, and it does help a lot. But, students getting to understand their personality styles and work styles is just real important, I think, important to them. And they really get it. We actually have them put little colored dots on their name tags after they've done True Colors. And they can put multiple dots, but it brings that conversation through the program, not just at the workshop, So, yeah,
Excellent.
that's
Great idea. Great idea. Have any of you used the True Colors assessments at the middle school level? Mark, talk about that.
Yeah, we started offering Young RYLA a number of years ago. I don't even know how many. That's how I got involved with RYLA, was when my daughter went to it.
Mm,
FYI, and then I said, "Oh, I've got to get involved with this." Yeah, we use that. We don't change it at all. We implement it the same way. There's a assessment. There's some guides pages in our book that all the kids get on. And when you're blue, how do you interact with an orange, or things like this.
mm,
And we find that one of the questions we ask is, I'm a counselor at RYLA, so I deal with the high school kids. How many of you went to Young RYLA, right? How many of you took this at Young RYLA? Did you change? Is it different? Do you remember it? Because we're always worried if we use some of the same curricula, if the kids are like, yeah, I kind of barely remember doing these things. I'm a different person now. 3 years later, I've matured a lot. So we find it's very valuable at that age. And arguably, what we're seeing just incidentally is a growth in our Young RYLA numbers and a decline in our RYLA enrollment. We're finding it harder to find high school students that are willing to take a week of their summer to go do a camp. And the middle school kids they have more space in their lives, I think. And it's a really interesting dynamic that's happening. We don't know if it's COVID, if the trend was there before COVID, but anyway, that's a digression. So it works.
That's okay. That's a real life dimension to this, and it does seem like there's some shifting going on. I think it's very important for us to be savvy and address that. However,
Yeah.
I kind of, I had a blanket description. It wasn't the Great Resignation. It felt like the Great Disengagement.
Yeah.
And
Our numbers were way down this year.
yeah, and it
purposefully.
wasn't just kids, it's adults too. But
We also required vaccinations to be very Rotarian and supporting vaccinations in general, i.e. polio. And that knocked out a large demographic for us.
really,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, we serve
Same here.
we serve northern Colorado, the whole state of Wyoming, and western Nebraska. And we got 0 students from Nebraska this year. And the reason was they are like 20% vaccinated, and they wouldn't vaccinate their kids. And I'm not passing judgment. I'm just stating,
no, right.
data.
We
I'm
required
also the registrar.
vaccination. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm done.
We required vaccination or a negative test just before RYLA, and we got no pushback at all. I was surprised from parents on the negative test. And
We required that.
fortunately, we had no COVID. So it went well.
Anyway, I didn't mean to take us there. But
Yeah.
Sorry.
But
So-
in general, though, the middle school question is fascinating. We are finding that age group is very able to take the same lessons of RYLA and leadership, and getting it to them younger, I think, is better for the development of those individuals. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up, if that group continues to grow. We were limited in where we used to deliver our Young RYLA in space. We had to move them to the facility now where we do the older RYLA, which can handle more kids. And so we now expect to see the numbers grow there, which is a wonderful situation to be in. As long as we can get Rotary clubs to pay for it. Because we don't charge our kids anything. It's 100% free for them.
So Bruce,
Rick
is
had his
Rick-
hand up, I think. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to try to get Bruce to chime in here. I don't know if he's there. Bruce, are you there? Maybe he's not really there. I'm sorry, who had their hand up?
Rick had his hand up.
Well, I did on Mark's comment on COVID. So we were actually just talking, just yesterday, we went up to our camp. So we were talking about having the tests on hand, just in case somebody does get sick.
Yep.
Just so we know, just to be safe. And I know so here in Hawaii, we're pretty compliant. We led the nation. So I think we'll have no problem with that, but yeah.
Well, and
So.
it does kind of provoke a bigger picture question about RYLA in the face of disturbance, in the face of disruption. COVID isn't the last thing we're ever going to run into societally that will try to force us off the track. And I live in North Idaho, so I get what you're talking about. And our approach was steady as she goes. And for us, it became not an issue of how many students we got, but that we did it.
Yeah, 100%.
And so you get way fewer attendees, but those attendees that become your ambassadors for life.
Right.
And to go into it with the same heart, the same intention, the same goals. And these kids, it seemed to me, got something different out of it.
Yeah.
Something unique that they can take forward, which is pride and resilience. I mean, we talked about how hard, there were hardships that we never could have planned, that these families were going through. And yet here they come. So I think there is something to be said for steady as she goes, and not turning a blind eye, keeping it relevant, which is our work, to adapt our curriculum and the way we do what we do. We had a crazy, we had to divide our RYLA into part 1 and 2. It's a fall event, but we did part 1 in March and part 2 in the fall, so that we could do a day camp followed by a retreat weekend. It was insane. And we had pizza over there and salad way over there and cookies in the next room. And the students weren't allowed to serve themselves. We had masked volunteers. And then we spent a lot of time outside. But we were steady as she goes, and we got her done. So anyway.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Related to the topic, the original topic on assessments.
Yes, please.
Is anybody delivering more than one self-assessment during their RYLA? Do you do?
No, just one.
There's just one. Okay.
Just one.
Thank you for that question, Mark.
Jen has 2.
Jen has 2. Jen, talk about that.
Well, we use the Smalley, Dr. Smalley and Dr. Trent's 4 animal personality test. And that is the beaver, golden retriever, lion, and otter. And it's kind of similar to True Colors, like in that aspect. It's just breaking them up into groups by animals instead. And then we do the conflict mode instrument, which is phenomenal during our conflict resolution modules. So that one is really beneficial. We like that one a lot.
The Thomas Kilman.
Yeah.
So Jen, how do you?
Is there a fee for that one?
We have 2 minutes left. I'm sorry. And
Okay,
Caitlin had her hand up.
Okay.
No, I'd rather hear about the conflict
Okay.
mode.
Is there a fee for that?
I don't actually lead that module. I'd have to ask the person that does it. We have different groups, like I'm just the chair, so I run like the whole thing, and then I have other people do the different modules. So I can have them send that information.
And
That would be great.
I will, that link to that conflict mode assessment is one of the links I'll send you as well. And you can actually, on the website where it will take you, you can actually download a sample assessment, so you could see, if you were to answer the questions, what do you get out of it? And it's really helpful in anticipating the use of that tool.
Folks, we've got 20 seconds. I'm sorry, this is such
Can I
a
ask
great
a quick
discussion.
question? Just a show of hands. Does anybody is RYLA run by adults or run by youth? Like we're run by youth. Does anybody else do that?
Oh, no.
For the
It's for us,
counselors?
for us, it's a blend.
Okay. It's really interesting. We can talk about
Thank
that.
you. Hello, everyone. I think if you'd like, we can all unmute, I think, with a small group like this and kind of keep it a little conversational if you like, unless you've got barking dogs or, you know, crying children or laundry or something like that going on. Welcome, everyone. We're here to, I guess we'll maybe wait just another minute. Looks like we still have folks coming in. Karen, are you running your session?
There was no one signed up, so I thought I will come to yours.
Oh, okay. All right.
I assume if someone does sign up, Chris will let me know. But
Okay. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. I was hoping we could go around just very quickly and introduce yourself, first name, and tell us what district and particularly what town you live in, and then whether or not you have used one or more assessments in your RYLA events. So let's just go around quickly. Marguerite?
Margaretta,
Margaretta, why don't you start us off?
District 5170. Hi, Mark. So I was involved in RYLA for 11 years, did the leadership program now, and I've been district youth services chair, a few things. I'm kind of like just here for consulting and stuff at this point, letting the new leadership take over. And yes, we put an assessment form in since day one, because we actually looked at and had them rate different modules, talk about what they wanted to learn, what they liked about it. So, and I'm a firm believer in 1 through 10 doesn't give you squat. All right. So I'm a firm believer in comments. So we did a lot of comment-based assessments.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right. Tim.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually visiting. I'm from all the way over in Long Island, New York, District 7255. And we do use self-assessment. They're currently on paper, so we're going to try and move that soon.
To go to more of an online format?
Yeah, easier to kind of put everything together.
Okay, thank you for that. That's one of the issues maybe we can explore a little more about the advantages and disadvantages of those two formats. Mark.
I'm from District 5170 also, as is Margaretta. I'm from Pleasanton North Rotary. I have multiple overlaps with what's going on today. I'm involved with Rotary and Youth Service for over 20 years. I've been on the governing board of Junior Achievement for over 20 years. I've known Barry for Posner for almost that length of time. So, and I'm a graduate of Santa Clara University. So I'm just really interested in all of this. I haven't had a specific role in RYLA except as being youth service chair and having been responsible for getting kids there and also attending just as a visitor to see the results. And I'm in great I'm in great admiration of everything they do. It is incredible. That one visit during the week when returns get to come in and hear the students tells you the impact that RYLA has.
Yes, yes.
It really does.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I share your view. Ken.
Oh, I'm not muted. Wow. Good. I was looking to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Ken. I'm from 5495 in beautiful Arizona. I live by Luke Air Force Base on a little county island called Waddale. I was a member of a Rotary Club for 3 years. Then I went to my first RYLA in year 4 and became a Rotarian. And I've been going back every year since. And last year I chaired our first ever junior RYLA. So, and yes, we do use assessments, and our committee gathers up after the end of every camp, and we go through the assessments and look for areas that we can improve them. So.
So the assessments you're referring to are these feedback assessments?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Very good. Well, I'm gonna present a few self-awareness assessments here, just kind of as a deeper dive into that menu I showed you here in just a few minutes. Karen, I'm just gonna skip over you just for right now, since we kind of know where you're coming from.
Well,
Bailey, how about you?
Hi there. So, my name is Bailey Ivory. I'm representing 5180, 5190. I am a RYLA graduate in 2016 and have come back the last 4 years as a counselor. And we base a lot of our program around emergenetics, which our students take prior to attending RYLA. And then one of our processes we call a sailboat analogy, which is much more of a self-awareness kind of toolbox and assessment. And I found it really, really helpful as a student, and probably even more helpful coming back as an adult. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Pamela, real quick, where are you from, and tell us about assessment tools you've used. Can you
She's still muted.
unmute?
She's still muted.
You need to unmute.
Pamela.
Uh-oh, there she goes.
Okay, I'm from 5170 and I work with Mark. I'm from Tri-Valley Rotary Club. It's an evening club. And our RYLA, our Interact school was a charter school and it has been diminished. So now I work with Mark at Pleasanton North.
And your RYLA, so your experiences would be similar.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for that.
You're
Tony?
welcome.
Yes, I'm Tony Pino, and I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, District 5520. I'm the Youth Services Chair. I'm the Boys Camp RYLA Chair, and we meet for a week, and so do the girls meet for a week. And we do use assessment. We have outside people come in to each camp that help us have the kids do self-assessment and that type of thing as part of the program. So
you have outside facilitators that come in?
yes.
Okay. Do you have to pay them for that?
No, they volunteer.
Okay. And so let's, to your point, and then I want to move on for sure. This is definitely an option that we have. It's not always true that members of our Rotary team are either certified or accomplished in facilitation of one assessment tool or another. And it may be a better choice to bring someone in from the outside, and there's nothing wrong with that. To be able to get them to volunteer services tells us a lot about who that person is. And clearly they've been made aware about what RYLA is all about. So that's awesome. Thank you for that, Tony. And Judy?
Oh, hi, I'm Judy Johnson, President-elect from Novato Sunrise, District 5150. And I worked with Lynn at my first in-person camp, did the Zoom last year. So I'm a facilitator and I'm here to learn anything I can about RYLA. It was a fabulous experience. And I certainly, if you're talking about assessment, I apologize. I'm not quite sure if it's the assessment for facilitators or bringing people in. I was a bit of a part of that, and there was lots of Zoom training for years. So there was a personal questions asked. A list came up with lists of questions and kind of like an interview this year that was different. But I don't know if I'm answering the right question, so I apologize for that. I was gone for a couple minutes.
No, you're spot on. I'm just kind of trying to get a read on this little group here, in terms of experience using assessment tools and where you're from and basically what your demographic is, because that's a variable, club to club, district to district. So what I'm going to do now is briefly share my screen and kind of pick up where I left off during my snapshot. I want to actually dive a little deeper in some specific assessment tools that are out there. Certainly is not a comprehensive list because there's hundreds of them. However, in choosing an assessment tool, we always want to err on the side of a validated tool, something that has stood the test of time, is based in science and research, known to be effective. We don't just want to blindly go out and fish for something that is not credible. So I have a few examples of that to show you. I'm just going to share my screen here. And hopefully everybody can see that. So, you know, assessment tools and experiential learning are just this perfect marriage. Experiential learning is all about presenting a group of students with a physical activity, and, you know, in navigating that as a group. You know, there's a myriad of different activities I know that we have in play. But as we debrief these activities from an experiential learning perspective, we're asking these questions. We're asking students to talk about what happened. You know, what happened, and how did you cope with it? How did you feel about it? How did you navigate it? What happened? And to go around and share that. And then to ask the question, so what? You know, why does that matter? Why does it matter how we processed or navigated that and how we came away feeling about it? Does it matter that we felt trapped and could not, you know, come out and lead that activity? Did it matter that we were forced into a leadership role and it made us feel really uncomfortable? Did it matter that our team was there to support us in that activity? So to flush out those realities, and then to ask the question, so now what? You know, how does that experience apply to what we do going forward in our schools, in our workplace, you know, in perhaps college to be, and perhaps in contributing to end polio now globally? You know, now what? What happens next? So where our assessment tools fit into that matrix is they can provide a specific filter. For example, if your RYLA team chooses to use a conflict mode instrument, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute, then how do these experiences run through that conflict resolution filter? You know, what happened? Maybe the students will share that, gosh, you know, that what just happened is it really goes against what I'm used to believing in and what my values are. And I was like this, it just didn't sit well. And so what does that matter? Well, maybe it matters because I'm just not as skilled as I want to be about being in a group or a group of people I don't know, which is destined to happen in my future, and be able to lean in and work a group through that conflict. And then now what? Now I'm better. Now I get it. Now I know myself and I know where I default, and I know what I have to bring in order to resolve conflict in a group. So that's just one example of a tool that can serve as a filter for an activity. You know, emotional intelligence is something that we talk about a lot. There are some assessment tools that I'll present here in just a second. You know, if you look at this pyramid, these are the components of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence model. And at the base of the pyramid is self-awareness. You know, and that is what these assessment tools really are all about, is to help RYLArians discover more about themselves and who they are and how they behave at this point in time, with the goal, the implicit goal of, okay, here I am today, you know, where do I want to grow? What do I want to grow into? And where would I like to be in the future? Realizing that leadership is learned and we can make changes. I showed you this menu of assessment tools earlier, and, you know, just kind of glancing at those, what I'd really like you to consider for your own RYLA events is, which of these areas do you see implemented into your events that perhaps you've never tried before? Or which ones have you tried and worked really well, or maybe didn't work as well as you hoped they would? So just to kind of expand on my menu just a little bit, these are some very popular personality preference assessments that are out there. The Enneagram is upper left, Myers-Briggs type indicator is upper right, DISC lower left, and True Colors is lower right. I've learned today that a lot of you have used the True Colors assessment very successfully in various age groups. So that was kind of cool. Maybe we'll get back and talk more about that. This is Dr. Posner's Student Leadership Challenge, and I am using this assessment tool as we speak. My RYLA event is coming up the first weekend of November, so you can imagine where my head is at and that I'm getting no sleep right now. But I actually am using the Student Leadership Practices Inventory that you see here. It's a $6 booklet that allows students to answer questions about their perception of themselves as leaders currently. It identifies their strengths, and then it identifies areas that they would naturally want to grow into from here. I'm super excited about using this instrument, and I'm going to use Posner's overarching 5 practices framework for my event. So I'm just super excited, and you all can hop on that bandwagon as well. This is the CPI 260 coaching report for leaders. It's part of the Myers-Briggs Company family of assessments. So you can go to mbti.org and you can get this. By the way, that reminds me, I'm going to be sending out to all participants in today's conference a handout here in a few days that lists all these assessment tools and links to them, so that you can go directly and explore them for yourselves, discover how much they cost, if anything. Actually, on this particular assessment tool, you can actually download a sample, which shows a person actually having taken this and how the report looks on the other side. So it can give you an idea of what that's about. The TKI conflict mode instrument is fabulous. It also is under that MyersBriggCompany.org, but this specifically will help RYLArians understand their default conflict mode and how they can better build skills to activate other modes that aren't as comfortable to them and adapt them to certain circumstances in their lives. Gallup has created the Clifton Strengths Assessment tool. This is not so much about personality or conflict. It's more about what am I good at? What am I not as good at? And what do I want to get better at? So it's a pretty cool tool. Emotional intelligence, this ESCI assessment tool is correlated with Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence series. He's kind of the pioneer in EI. And this is a very cool tool if you want to delve more deeply into that. And then Travis Bradbury has written the book, you've probably seen it, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And he also has an assessment tool associated with his program. So those are 2 that you could look at and consider if you want to get back into that. And then one other one I'm just going to throw out here that you may not be familiar with. The Neuro Leadership Institute was created by David Rock. He's got a number of renowned books, one of which is Your Brain at Work. You may have read that one. But this institute is based, its mission is to do research in the realm of neuroscience as it applies to leadership. And they have come up with a SCARF model. I've used this with middle schoolers, and they love this. They get it. But it's a way to evaluate a person's drivers to motivate a group and engage a group. And it's a really fun one to get into. So those are just kind of a sampling. And again, I will be sending you links to all these tools so that you can research them a little more. So a question for all of you to kind of get us going, and please feel free to just kind of chime in. Thinking about your RYLA events and how they are currently run, Do you see an assessment tool as something you would provide to attendees in advance of your event so that they come to RYLA with an advanced understanding of themselves and what to expect for discussion topics? Or do you see it as something you would actually integrate into your program when everyone gathers? Advantages, disadvantages? Bailey, any thoughts?
Sure. So we do the what, so what, now what after every process at RYLA. So we kind of end our day with a quick 10 minutes of like quiet time.
So you're kind of frozen, Bailey.
We'll probably lose her, Debbie.
Why
Okay, so Bailey, maybe.
And on it, that journal is like my little keepsake, and that I have something that.
So Bailey, I think we'll come back to you because you're kind of freezing. So maybe we'll come back to you. Great stuff though, from what you said.
So Debbie, I think for us, it's like, and I haven't been to fully in our camp for quite a few years.
Sure.
I know we've done a lot. We've got one of our instructors, he's got a PhD in basically diversity studies. So we do a lot with the ethics and diversity we have for a long time. But I mean, I think there's a place for both. Like our leadership styles we teach, we actually have them fill it out while they're in the module, right? Because then we use it and it's fresh. And you know, sometimes it's better not to have too much thought into it, right? That they're getting it, you know, your first reaction versus how it's supposed to be answered.
Sure.
So I think that makes sense. You can do some things before to be able to do it, especially if you want to do, like even when I'm talking at work, right? We'll do a lot of stuff when I do team building for sessions at work. Filling it out in advance gets people geared up to like what can expect in that class, and it's good. But I mean, I think you've got to look at if you do too much giveaway.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like it's a fine line to work, and you really have to balance. Are you giving too much away or scaring them off, right? Because you could have that other side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. That's great stuff. That's worthy of thought for sure. How I might ask you all how I've experienced, I'm hearing about different RYLA events and different lengths of time. I've heard about from you all about 2-day events, 3-day events. And I think we're talking about the teen RYLAs versus a 5 to 7 day event. And probably this has a bearing on how we would use these assessment tools. Tim, do you have anything to say about that?
So the program that we run that I thought this would be most effective is our 2-week summer program. So you can really see a lot of development over that period of time. So with COVID, we shortened it to 9 days last year. But this year, again, we're going to go back up to that 14-day sleepaway. And I think it would be really great. I know like it's a long trip. They take 5 hours on a bus.
Wow.
So we're thinking, you know, that first day, right in my mind, is usually tough to kind of motivate them, but we can kind of get them in a group, sit them down, have them take the assessment and find out what their strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
And that night kind of divvy them out to those leaders, those group leaders, and say, all right, you know, this is the group that you're going to be dealing with. And then maybe even having some type of session where they don't know that they're actually in a group with people who identify similar to them on those assessments, and kind of having that kind of unveiled at the end of that session. And so there's a lot of work going on up here already. I'm really excited about these different types of assessments. We do use Emotional Intelligence 2.0 for our senior students. We have them actually read that book when they're first chosen. And then they work with a mentor all year. They have an individual mentor all year and kind of work on their leadership style and what they need to improve on.
And are these Rotarians?
Those are actually alumni who have gone through the program. So, and have, sat in their shoe. Usually they're about, I mean, now our alumni, there's doctors and, professors and stuff. And it's like, wow, we're getting up there. But so it's usually that experience. We've seen a lot of positive feedback and we started implementing it. I think this is our 3rd year doing that.
Wonderful. Wow. You have a lot of invested people working with you.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. Tony, why don't you share your experience with assessment tools, and do you have you administered them? Which ones? Do you do it before or during?
We need to do better at it. And I'm glad I'm in this session to learn more about the availability of assessment. We do have someone come into the camp that does an interactive activity with, I know it happens with the boys camp, which I'm involved with, and I think somebody else comes in for the girls camp, but it's an assessment that activity where the boys decide, based on certain questions, they move to different parts of the room and they get to see which group of leadership or what their personality characteristics are amongst the group and so forth. It's quite interesting and it helps us, but we need to use more assessment for early on in the camp and then maybe throughout the camp and do more so that we can get a better feel. It happens too late in the camp for us to understand certain things, but we can kind of tell based on where the boys put themselves in the groups that, yep, that's exactly where they should be, what they're thinking of themselves. And sometimes it's revealing that not in the personality area that we think might be it. So
interesting. So you're kind of learning right along with them as the camp goes on. So maybe just to be just a little bit more proactive with them is what I think I hear you saying.
Right.
And be able to really see those realizations kind of bubble up as the camp goes forward. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Ken, how about you?
Could you restate the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious in your experience with assessment tools, assuming you've had some, and maybe you could tell us about the ones you've successfully used. But the contrast of administering an assessment pre-camp and then having the students come with some advanced warning, if you will, of what's going to happen versus incorporating them into the event itself. Pros and cons.
I wanted to make sure I was in the right place. Last time I got it wrong. So anyhow, we use True Colors.
Okay.
We do it at camp.
Oh, you do it at camp. And how long is your camp?
I felt like it should be done pre-camp. So that way we have an idea of the students when they come in. But
so you like the idea of doing it ahead?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Awesome.
Gives you more time to work on it too.
Yeah. Judy, how about you?
Hi. Well, gee, I am a total freshman in high school on this whole subject.
Okay.
So I'm here to soak it up.
I'm sorry. I already knew that about you. I apologize.
That's okay. I don't care. We use the one, I'm not sure who it is, but it's the owl, koala, lion, and
yeah,
peacock.
Yeah, that's the
and that's the one we use, whoever did that. But I find that fascinating. At our camp this year, which is my first in person, we had a guy come in and he did that on site. And it's a big room, and I think that typically works once they identify who they are, then they kind of went into the four corners, and then they did got the big sheet and started discussing, I guess, what they were all like. I wasn't not in the middle of that, but that's the one I've come across all in all our RYLA training. And also, in Pearls, there's a disc DISC. I think it's basically kind of similar. And obviously, you know all about this, and I don't. So, but I love it. I want to do it to our club, you know, find out who everybody, if they're a lion or something. So I mean, it's certainly the first time I ever did it was in RYLA training. Yeah, we've always, you know, I'm 69. I've never done any of that leadership stuff, so it's all new to me, and it's all really great and healthy. And then, yeah, watching what happened with the campers after doing that assessment, I believe it was at the camp.
Okay.
They may have done it ahead of time. I'm not clear on that, to be honest, but
okay.
But I love the fact I want to give it to everybody I know. So anyway, that's my input. So
Yeah,
I'm a
and so-
total freshman.
Well, we really appreciate you being here and giving us that fresh perspective. It's really grounding. So thank you for being here. You know, just a passing comment, and then Karen, I know you've got a comment, but I don't know about you all, but you know, when we get all excited and passionate about these RYLA events, and we're in the midst of our fellow Rotarians who maybe have other interests and aren't so much youth oriented, in the end, I get them leaning in and saying, well, we need this for adults. And so I fondly have called that potential initiative RYLA, so Rotary Adult Leadership Award. And it's probably never going to gain traction at all, but because I know we've got pets for our president-elects and all of that, it's probably a lot of this goes on. But yeah, I think maybe we need a RYLA. So Karen, go ahead with your comment.
Well, just two comments, two different domains of comment. One related to what you just said. It seems there are two forms of assessments. One is, and we do it at the end of every day, an assessment by the campers of the activity of the speakers. So we get feedback and know what worked and what didn't work, who we should invite back and who we should. So those are in terms of the assessments. The other thing you're talking about is the assessment of participants, and that's where I think you get into these personality assessments, whether it's True Colors or some other form. And I think these campers is the first time they've ever been exposed to the fact, well, people really have different personality styles. We use True Colors in approaching whatever they do as a part of a team. And through the debriefing sessions we have every evening, you start to see that to be conversation that emerges over time. And that, so for example, recognizing how a blue is going to act, you may be disrespectful if you don't give them an opportunity to participate, even if it slows down the green who's got the plan all worked out and things of that sort. So I think there's value in understanding something like True Colors, and in debriefing sessions, talking about how they showed up in the problem solving kids were doing on a particular task. I will tell you, I played, this is relevant to what Ken said. When I was club president, I had a speaker cancel at the last minute. I decided, well, I'm going to do True Colors with my club members. We have a big club, but they always hear the campers come back for their camper breakfast and talk about, well, I'm green and I'm orange and I did this and most of the club doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. So I said, okay, we're going to do True Colors. And I got candies to different colors, and I gave them each the survey, the one-page survey to take to identify their primary color. And then after they did the assessment, I talked about what are the characteristics of each color so that they could understand the difference. And I invited all the past presidents to come up. And I asked them to group themselves by their main color so that people could recognize there's not just one color that leads a team, but couldn't you see differences in these presidents as they led your club just because of their primary true color? Okay. And so I think that's an exercise, that's a way you could play with what our club members like in terms of colors. The other thing I would mention is when I went through True Colors certification training, one of the things they did was to split us all by our main color. Okay. So I'm with all the greens. And the task was to create a commercial that would appeal to a different color. That's hard work, folks, because you're naturally going to do what your color is. And we were green, achievement, and had to appeal to blues who go from the heart. We actually had one person very data oriented on our team who got up from the table and left. He could not figure how to make something appealing to another color. But that was very insightful instruction. But this is not easy. But if you're going to have a team with different colors, you need to appreciate them, which is what you reinforce in all the RYLAs, you know, what you did in the activity and see how you personality, their opinion and stuff. But it happens with adults all the time. And I think it's very good training for people to have and recognize that.
So I really appreciate that, Karen. I think, you know, I was in our last session, we were kind of talking about this same idea in terms of, you know, using these personality preference assessment tools is, you know, to have an activity where you put, for example, if we're using Myers-Briggs, which is the one I'm more used to using, but you know, putting your introverts all together and your extroverts all together and then have them do a project. And you don't have to say anything, you just watch it. And it's hysterical. I mean, you know, and of course the introverts and extroverts groups are watching each other going, what's wrong with them? Nothing, you know, they're so quiet. How can they possibly be getting anything done? And I mean, you don't have to even, you know, frame it. It just happens. And it's a really fun thing. And then to follow by mixing them up and have them do a different project and watch the magic. So just this concept of how we are strength in diversity. Diversity makes us stronger. And to be able to illustrate that through experiential learning is really fun. The other thing, the other point to be made, and we talked a little about this in the last session, is with these various assessment tools, there's a risk of causing this feeling that RYLArians are being pigeonholed and they're being labeled and they're being judged for this label. And I've actually had groups, not in RYLA, but other groups I've worked with, just kind of push back against the whole assessment process for that reason. So I think for us as RYLA leaders using assessment tools, it's really important from the beginning as we're framing this experience to simply say that we are all a mixture of all of it. And it's, you know, and therefore we all have the capacity to bring out a characteristic that we may not feel the most natural in doing. In other words, we all have our default, but we all have the capacity to flex and bend, especially if we practice it, which is what RYLA is all about, is being able to practice bringing our alter style, if you will, to bear in order to complete a task. So to be real careful that we're not implying that we're this on only this, and we're pigeonholing and we're categorizing people, and just say that from the get-go, is because that is a risk if we don't do that.
Deb, I think it's also recognizing and appreciating the strengths of others, and recognizing, well, you know, this person is stronger in this direction. Feelings, for example, I need to hear from them because it might be my lowest color. You have all colors, and by bringing that out in the person who's blue, you're listening to them. A, you're respecting a different color, and B, you're getting the value of that person's perspective on the problem-solving task, because you're not going to be good at imitating your lowest color. As much as someone who would be that as a main color. And I think it's really important. You know, a leader is not a leader without a team. And so it's very important to know how to leverage the strengths of other team members to bring that to the table versus trying to force yourself to do all of those colors, because you're not going to excel in all of them, but use your team members to are.
So thank you for that, Karen. So we just have a few minutes left. You know, a question I'd really like to raise, kind of a big picture question here, is there's no point in implementing assessment tools if we don't have a learning outcome in mind. The idea is to enrich the RYLA experience with these various tools that promote self-awareness. So if I were to ask you the question, you know, what what is it about the use of these devices that changes our learning, our desired learning outcomes? And and what changes about the learning outcomes we're expecting from a RYLA if we're using these assessment tools? How does that change what we expect? So
I'll answer your question, Deb, and I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but two things like I popped in earlier is that what I find is most of the students come that high schools have done some kind of an assessment test before. They don't come in, never have taken a personality test or never have taken a leadership test. I find it the other way. But what we find is that because we don't focus on, well, here's your style, and yes, we let them walk out with 4 color ribbons if they want, but it's the fact that we focus it on how to work best with others. And like a thing we'll say, it's like, okay, blues, the guys who are the quiet guys in the background, tell me, like we talk, and they finally have a chance to talk, and it's interesting. And then we play a game afterwards where you guys have probably seen it, a team building thing, but it works great for how you participated, is you have pieces of PVC type, 4 of them, and they have to go from end of the room without letting the ball fall, ping pong ball over top. They have to go back to the beginning. And then they can talk about how their teams work together and what they needed to learn from it, because it's a great application. So that's what we do for it.
Yeah, that's a great activity. I've run that one. It's pretty funny, depending on how far you make them go.
Yeah.
And if you make them go over hill and dale, over picnic tables, and anyway. So thank you for that, Margareta. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts about learning outcomes and how they can be augmented using using assessment tools? I love what Margareta just said, is to basically better able to focus on how to work with others. I mean, that's huge. What else? Bailey, do you want to finish what you were saying before, kiddo?
I can definitely try. I don't
I'm
know
so
how great my
sorry.
Wi-Fi is. No, don't be sorry at all. Honestly, I think one of the coolest parts of our program is we do emergent edits. So our students take it prior to coming to RYLA. They have no idea what the results mean. We structure our groups based on similarly these colors. So we kind of get those like perfect, brilliant groups. And then one of the days we design a theme park within our groups. And then we also divide them based on their different colors, and also have them create a theme park. And we get to see all these like different ideas of, our social learners who are like, it's free to come. Whereas like our conceptual and structural learners are like, got the trash cans and parking lots all built out and things like that.
That's great.
So that's a really cool process. But in terms of like a learning objective, one of the biggest takeaways from that is then realizing how I and all the different learners can be better facilitators when we realize that it's not necessarily about our learning style, but how we can incorporate everybody's learning style to create the best outcome, whether it be at a project, whether it be in the classroom, etc. But also having some like physical take-home ideas and tools so that we can use it outside the 1 week we spend at RYLA.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. Well said. Well, those, yeah, very, very powerful stuff. I love your activity with the designing a theme park. I think I'm going to use that one. That's fabulous. Who doesn't want to design a theme park, right?
Yeah.
We have, we're going to have to probably say goodbye to each other here in just a couple minutes. So let me just thank you all for your participation and for being a part of this. I don't know about you all, but I feel like I've learned something, so I'm grateful for that. And I hope your RYLA events continue to be extraordinary.